Hey guys, my name is Michael Duhig. I'm a good friend of Manny. We've known each other too long, I suppose. He's also the godfather of my son, so you could say we're pretty tight. So a little bit about me. I'm a educational developmental psychologist, so that kind of means I deal with primarily children and adolescents through lifespan issues, I guess in a medical context. So for example, if they're experiencing anxiety and depression and those sorts of things, I would assist with a paediatrician or a multidisciplinary team to come up with some answers as to why that's the case. So in this context, obviously we're not looking at any type of medical illness or anything like that. We're looking at sports performance, but you can also take a lot of the things that we use in the medical field and the allied health field over to the sports and performance area. So one of the models that we use is what we call the Biosocial Model. So I guess this is a little bit different in terms of disease. So for example, we all play footy, we're all athletes here. If you go into a tackle and break your arm, then you go to the hospital, you get an x-ray, the doctor says you've got a break, you put a cast on, 6 to 8 weeks later it's healed up, you get to go again. Yeah, pretty sort of go straight from A to B, a bit of a linear fashion. But with disease it's a little bit different, so you've got to look at sort of the whole picture and not just the one injury per se. So we use that sort of biological, psychological and social model to get a broad range of variables that we can see why a certain thing is happening. So Manny's asked me to come in today just to talk about that model, but particularly the social model and that aspect to it. So biologically, it's a little bit predetermined. If your parents are 5'10", you're not going to be a 6'5" second rower. Yeah. So we can't do too much about the biological fashion of things. The psychological aspect to that, you could say it's sort of half predetermined, half up to you. So the way that I like to look at that is, your keyboard's already there, and the way that you play the keys, that's going to determine your psychological well-being. So it's a little bit up to you, it's a little bit up to your genetics and your environment. But I guess the social aspect is one thing that we have a lot of power over in doing. Okay, so I guess it's no secret that if we take a bit of perspective from, I guess, the English Premiership and those sorts of things, you've got young people in academy, 12, 13, 14 years of age. And they get them into those academies from a rugby perspective, sure to get them on an S&C program, sure to keep them sort of, contracted to their different clubs. But it's also about, including them in a big performance environment, so they try and sort of socially engineer the things that they do. So if you have elite athletes hanging out with other elite athletes, guess what happens? It breeds success, right? So I guess for us down here today, we're not a big rugby club, we're not a massive performance centre yet, but we can still learn those lessons from those big institutions and apply them to our everyday sort of daily functioning. Yeah. So how do we do that? And I guess this comes from a mindset of every little bit counts towards your overall performance, whether you're in school, whether you're working. It takes into account the things you put in your body for your nutrition, your recovery. They all sort of come together about how you perform on a Saturday or a Sunday or whatever your chosen sport day is. Does that make sense? Okay. So I guess for the social aspect to what we're doing here, it's kind of like, if we're in a workforce or in a school environment, who are the people that we're kind of sharing our time, sharing our part of the day with? Who are the people that we're putting effort into connecting with and knowing and those sorts of things, yeah? So for a lot of us it'll be family, whether it's kind of mum and dad or if we've got our own families, but also the friends aspect too. So I guess the big question here is, those people that you're associating with, how are they helping you for your personal development, for your personal performance and those sorts of things, and vice versa? So, I mean, if I was in your position right now, I'd be having a little bit of a think through my head, my best mates, my best mate, who do I sort of hang out with the most, and what sort of similarities do we share and those sorts of things, and how does that sort of aid my overall development? So, I guess I'm going to use some anecdotal information here from Manny and I when we were back in, Nudgee over a decade ago, and it wasn't sort of uncommon to see like, the footy guys hang out with the footy guys, or the people that like to, jump on a skateboard and maybe do some other things on weekend to hang out with those sorts of people. So you definitely had your different groups. And I guess it's how did you sort of, make sure that you're within that right group to follow what dreams that you want to achieve and those sorts of things, yeah. And I guess being among those groups will tell you a lot about your individual performance, but also maybe your individual pathways in life. If you're a part of those groups that maybe didn't make some good decisions and got into a bit of strife. It wasn't uncommon for you as an individual, but you as the group to kind of also wear that same sort of branding. So I guess now that you guys are at the the stage of your lives when you're at school or at a workplace, that you can kind of possibly change groups or differentiate yourself a little bit. It's good to keep in mind that kind of end product of what we're working towards. Because I think for all of us now, and especially you younger guys, you're still under construction per se. Yeah. So it's really good to get a bit of an idea about where your end product wants to be, where you are now, and then what goals and things you need to tick off between here and there to make sure you're on that right pathway. Does that make sense? Cool. So I mean, do any of you guys have any questions about where you're at now and some of the groups that you're with, or maybe some of the psychological basis behind certain things and how you can use that to work towards where you want to be?
Who's your best friend, Huey?
Best mate at school.
Just best mate.
Maybe Harry Bella.
Okay. Is based on what Michael's saying, what is Harry Bella in terms of what you want to achieve?
Yeah, good bloke, top bloke,
Mm.
good at footy, so goes right and he works hard, consistently.
So he's got a lot of positive traits then. Yeah. So, I mean, if you're hanging around with people that are ticking boxes, achieving goals, it kind of, with that self-reflection process, it means that, you're kind of on the right track to doing what you want to do as well. So it's normally a pretty good, marker of where you want to be in that respect, which is good. But I guess at the same time, if, this is just one example and you're all filtering through your own minds about other people that, maybe aren't on that trajectory or aren't achieving those goals, then I guess it's up to you whether you continue along and have that relationship or that connection. Yeah. I mean, being quite young, it's a bit of a tough call, but I mean, like Manny and I, from our experience, if we see someone we went to high school with, we're still going to stay today. But I mean, if they weren't sort of on the same path as what we're choosing to do, then we might not put as much energy and that sort of thing into continuing those connections. Yeah. And I guess this is particularly hard for